Hello, boys and girls, moms and dads. Aunt Carole here. I'm excited to start reading our new book, How's Inky? Chapter 1, The Sanctuary of Wegimind, Haven for Wildlife. Nature was lavish with the newborn loveliness of spring. Lakes still held the leftover chills of winter. Fingertips of green new growth were appearing on balsams. Tender leaves of aspens had begun their summer-long dance, while juneberry and cherry blossoms burst forth among the evergreens, looking like sprays of popcorn. The great forest all about us seemed so alive and happy it had difficulty expressing itself fully. Birds back from their winter journey were singing almost violently. Flowers were singing from the forest floor. Trees were singing in the winds. Stars were singing in clear night skies. And human hearts were singing with the very joy which comes with this season of new birth. Within the sanctuary of Wegimind, springtime happiness was enhanced by a contributing factor. It was now the 5th year in which that area had been closed to hunting and trapping. The wild creatures of the region had learned of their safety. No longer were they afraid to show themselves in daylight along lake shores and in the open fern patches of hillsides. No longer did they dash for shelter at the first sight or sound of man. Instead, a cautious friendliness was dawning. Deepening peace rested upon forest halls and permeated the very atmosphere. But in the midst of all this, we felt that adventure was brewing for us, and we were right. There were 3 of us at the sanctuary at the time: good old Tom Norton, Bobby, and myself. Tom Norton was the grand old gentleman who had spent his boyhood with the pioneers of Indiana. His hair was now white with the caress of years, his manner mellowed with habitual kindness and thoughtfulness, and his rich memory packed with recollections and stories everyone was anxious to hear, and which he loved to tell. He had a ready wit that kept his companions in laughter. His stories came out of his wealth of experience, his love for and interest in his fellow beings. And sometimes, accompanied by a wink and a twinkle in his eye, the stories came directly from Tom Norton's imagination. "There's no harm in touching up a story a little to make it interesting," he used to say. At the sanctuary, he was known as the judge. Not that he ever had been a judge, but he looked like one, and with his fairness and fineness of character, he would have made a fine one. Everybody loved Judge Norton. Now, as to Bobby, he was one of the most boyish boys I have ever seen. He was so very much alive and alert to everything, filled with curiosity and bubbling enthusiasm. And he had that happy faculty of getting into and out of trouble constantly. The day seemed woefully empty if Bobby hadn't spilled a jar of jam in his lap, put varnish in the pancakes, tipped over the coffee pot, lost his shirt or his shoes in the house, or himself in the woods. Everybody loved Bobby, too. There's a certain wholesome promise in such a lad. Boyish boys make manly men. We 3 were quite happy living in the woods together, but actually the smoothness and ease of things gave us concern. We spoke of it, and the judge warned us not to get too comfortable and soft, that likely something would break loose soon. It wasn't that life at the sanctuary then lacked interest or was monotonous. There just wasn't anything giving cause for worry, and that didn't fit in with our usual experiences. In times past, we had such problems as the bears, who liked to climb onto the roof and pull off the roofing paper, the porcupine, who insisted on chewing to slivers the posts which held up our cabin, the epidemic of deer mice that literally took over our place and especially loved to jump in our faces in the middle of the night, the chimney swallows that nested in our fireplace chimney one cold spring while we shivered and shook with no fire to warm us until the little birds grew strong enough to fly away. But now, well, things were just too smooth. A bear was coming nightly to within 100 feet of our porch door to get food we placed there for him, but that was all right. He didn't try to come in. Chipmunks and squirrels were friendly as usual, climbing all over us with no fear and little respect. Rascal, our raccoon pet of 2 years previous, was coming in nightly, but he was no trouble, for he could open the screen door for himself and come into the porch to get his midnight dinner. One night, however, Rascal did create a minor bit of confusion. We had forgotten to prepare his food. He came, expecting the usual good service, and didn't receive it. Hence, he helped himself. He opened the icebox, climbed in, and for a little while must have behaved like a fur-covered cyclone. We had been out on a canoe trip. When we returned late that night, we found the smoothness of our life had been broken for the time being at least. What a mess we found on the porch. 24 eggs had been taken from the icebox and smashed on the floor. Rascal liked eggs in every form. He had eaten them boiled, fried, scrambled, poached, and on toast, but never smashed on the floor. So he tried that. Apparently he liked it, as he had eaten almost all of them, leaving just enough debris to decorate things properly. Bacon had been pulled out on the floor, and a bowl of gravy very carefully turned upside down. On the top shelf of the icebox had been a large jar of strawberry preserves. That had been tipped over, and the strawberries were hanging like little monkeys throughout the wire shelves below. Mustard and ketchup were in the jello. Milk was spilled on the ice. Fruit juice was flowing around among cold vegetables. A head of lettuce was in a dish of applesauce, and tomato juice was in everything. 2 hours' work, and the mess was cleaned up. Thereafter, food always was placed out for our little rascal. We had learned our lesson. That night, as we went to bed, we heard the judge singing one of his improvised songs to the tune of Turkey in the Straw. Oh, maybe it's the stars and maybe it's the moon, but things are going to happen, and they're going to happen soon. So climb into your beds, get all the rest you can. It won't be so very long till trouble will begin. The very next morning, it began. And that's the end of chapter 1. I thought it was kind of fun, don't you? Except I wouldn't have liked cleaning up that mess Rascal left. Well, I'll see you again next time.